This week in the news roundup, a new TV show, some legal issues, some cool crossovers, and plenty of new crowdfunding projects for you to back. Let's find out what's happening for the week of September 14th, 2022. First up, we're going to talk about the Elder Scrolls. Usually we hear about a new version of Skyrim, including the board game one that we actually got a chance to play on Tabletop Simulator. I believe that's actually being delivered either right now or very close to now, but we have a new Elder Scrolls game. This one is titled Elder Scrolls: The Betrayal of the Second Era, and apparently this one will go all across the world, be it Skyrim, Morrowind, pretty much pulling from all the different lore and possibilities that the games have already set up. Now, this game is going to be going to GameFound for backing. Not a big surprise, because open world game, you should already assume this is going to be a very large game with lots of little minis and different bits. In fact, I believe they said there's over 30 story missions, which the ending can change depending on what you do in the first two, which is a little weird. But this game seems to be designed for those who love the world of Elder Scrolls, not specifically one game, letting you go everywhere and maybe not specifically tied to a certain entry within the game line. Now, this game is coming from two designers, Josh Carlson, who helped co-create Too Many Bones, as well as Michael Gernez, who's worked on a lot of mini things, in particular Star Wars Armada. So I do expect to see a lot of little troops and movement around that way. And of course, just like I said, both of these they've worked on games that are very big games, and that's not a big surprise already, even if I didn't tell you the designers. If I said, you're going everywhere in Elder Scrolls, you'd think a big game. Then you have to look back last week where we talked about the GameFound new insurance policy, so to speak, where you may get a refund if the price increases too much after pledging. Maybe we'll be able to compare this game with the Skyrim one if they are looking like similar components and details, and see whether the prices stay the same, whether we can see, okay, there's obviously been a 10% increase because of this policy. I'm really curious to see what this goes down. A lot of people are talking in the comments, some positive, some negative. I'm very curious to see what GameFound does in general, because that's something new and interesting. But if you are interested in this, it's planned to be slated to be released on GameFound, not shipping everywhere, around May next year. So you have some time to build up your wallet before you drop a whole bunch to dive back into the world of Elder Scrolls. At least it's not just another remake of Skyrim. This week, we're talking about Wizards of the Coast again, but this time, they're the ones wagging the finger. They have announced a preliminary injunction against TSR, in particular, their newest RPG that's in playtesting works, Star Frontiers, because it says that it will cause irreparable damage to the company. This is, I think, just part of a very long chain of events. If you don't know, pretty much TSR technically was the company before Wizards that had D&D, and then when Wizards bought D&D, I think they had that name, but they didn't use TSR, so they lost the rights to it, and now other companies are using it. In particular, this one that we're talking about, I believe, was founded by Gary Gygax, founder of D&D's son, Ernie Gygax Jr. So there's definitely the legacy connection there. But Wizards of the Coast, with their legal action, is saying how this old RPG, I believe this is a remake, not completely new, has some really big issues. Let me pull the list here. The things that they said is explicitly racist, bigoted, anti-trans, and alt-right material throughout the world building and character creation, which is a little bit interesting they caught this, but didn't catch it within their own products. See previous week's news video. Now, obviously, this is a really weird, interesting case of the original D&D company having this name, being someone else now who is connected to the original founder and stuff. And I'm really curious to hear, not even just this one take. I just imagine that they keep going back and forth. And I'm wondering whether this is something that a lot of lawyers and even legal scholars are looking at, because this seems to be the kind of thing I feel like we're going to see more and more as we continue in terms of things leaving the copyright. Will we see Disney yell at other people for all the Pinocchio movies coming out now, or is that still fine because that's open? But what if D&D finally enters into the public domain, things like that? This is not the end of these two butting heads, and I think Wizards is going to win because they're the bigger one. We'll have to wait and see. But I don't know anything else of what's going on in that RPG. I believe someone did leak the playtest stuff, but I haven't seen that. This is the kind of thing Weird stuff I have no knowledge on because I did not even touch a legal class in any shape or form. So, unfortunately, someone out there is going to have to take a deeper legal dive into this, probably using a lot of jargon that I would have no idea what it means. Now, it seems Fox is making a new anime show based on the Clue board game. They've partnered up with the E1, I believe is the name of Hasbro's entertainment department, as well as the Bento Box Animations. They do a bunch of American adult TV shows, that I almost want to say Adult Swim's, Fox, or Comedy Central kind of animations. The big one I know that they have worked on that is very popular being Bob's Burgers. Now, I assume that we don't know much beyond this, besides the animation, not even like voices, director, things like that. This would probably follow in the same suit. Like if you look at all the shows they work on, it's that adult comedy humor usually. So I don't expect this to be like a dark long movie. I'm expecting it to have a lot of silly jokes, those flashbacks and stuff. And I know Bob's Burgers is very well received. I can't remember I remember I looked through Bento Box's shows and there are ones, some I've recognized, but like not ones I remember people talking about like, oh, this is such a great show, you gotta watch this kind of thing. I mean, if it's popular, I guess it's good. I don't know if it would be the kind of thing that I would enjoy personally. And it's hard too, to Clue actually has a good movie in terms of a good board game movie. So I wonder if it's just going to be playing off that at all, or will try to separate itself completely. A lot though has happened since the movie, including the introduction of Dr. Orchid taking the role of the white player color piece. So I don't know what else to say. I don't know even if like someone's going to die each episode and almost like it resets itself, so it's not even continual. So like in this one, Colonel Mustard is the murderer, and then the next one, it's Professor Plum. We'll have to see, of course, who actually gets attached to it in terms of writing, directing, and voice acting and stuff like that, because those can really make or break a show. And we'll, of course, have to see what the final animation looks like as well. Finally, I want to go over some card spoilers. One of them I think people are going to be a bit more excited about. So first, we're going to look at Disney's Lorcana. I talked about this a few weeks back. We now have some card images, and we can try to extrapolate what some of them mean, what they do, what our thoughts on, well, at least my thoughts on them are. And I thought that'd be fun, and you can leave your comments. So first off, we're going to talk about here is Stitch. He has an ability where he can be played on top of another Stitch. I think the idea is he's like changing outfits and costumes. What surprises me about this one is, I will admit, by the way, I have not seen any of the properties shown here in a while. So I don't remember parts when this would happen. But I'm surprised. I assume the two stats here, you can see a sort of a circle like a sun with a 3 in it and a shield with a 5. I believe that's attack and defense. Could be completely wrong, but I'm actually surprised. I would imagine Stitch, just in my head of like card games, would be someone who's very aggressive. So we put him sort of going all in on attack. But maybe the 5 shield is all their attack and defense, and maybe the 3 is like some other kind of power used for a different ability. We've seen that before in games like Lord of the Rings, where you use a questing power, not just attack power, so that could be related. Next up, we have Maleficent in her dragon form, and this one makes perfect sense for me. High attack, and while I haven't seen Sleeping Beauty before, if I recall, that's sort of the final part of the movie where she turns into a dragon. That means she's getting serious, so it makes sense when this card enters play that she's going to take something out. This is her being very mad and angry. Now, Elsa is definitely the one I feel the most Magic the Gathering from, because she has an ability here that looks like I would say tap icon, but I assume the word in this game is exert, because it has like that symbol, then exert a chosen opposing character. In Magic, when you tap something down and it can't untap, it's known as icing. Ice powers in almost every related game usually is slowing something down. So the idea that Elsa slows something down seems pretty solid in terms of at least flavor and mechanics meshing. Speaking of which, I want to point out how this says freeze. If you look at Maleficent, it says Dragonfire, and Stitch was adoring fans. Those maybe could be reused, but this feels more like the kind of thing where the name is designed to be much more flavorful rather than something easily mechanically crossed over. When we look at Magic the Gathering with like First Strike, which is designed more to be an evergreen title rather than being something specific to a certain character. Then we've got Cruella de Vil. This is the one I think is just the funniest. Her ability is you'll be sorry, and pretty much she takes something out with her when she gets taken out. A very envious and sort of spiteful character. I mean, solid. And it looks like it's cheap. That all the costs are in the corner for 2. I don't know how hard it is, whether it's going to be like Hearthstone where you just get 1 each turn or if there's a way to ramp up more. But if you put out a lot of those and just keep trading and killing all their stuff, that could be a very strong strategy. Mickey Mouse, I don't know where the Little Tailor one is from, but when I usually picture Mickey Mouse in a lot of the video games, he's very active, jumping, moving around. So having an ability that makes him hard to catch, that seems to make sense. 5/5, balanced character. That tends to happen for your main mascot. Captain Hook here. He's good at fighting. He's dueling. I guess that's what challenge is. That's what it sounds like. I mean, his name is literally, or the subtext, sorry, is Forceful Duelist. I imagine that's how you'll differentiate. There'll be a Captain Hook, scared of alligators, Captain Hook, Peter Pan's foe. That would relate more with that title that way. Because this is where I think it's going to relate more to, I mean, I guess Magic does that with Planeswalkers, but I see it a lot more with Pokemon and Digimon, where if you say, I have a Pikachu card, that doesn't narrow things down, like very little. You need a way to differentiate a bit more. And they're going to do that here too, because you can't just make one Mickey Mouse. You're going to have different sets and different abilities, different things you pull from. So we'll have to see what happens there. Finally, Robin Hood. He's got a way for you to draw if your opponent has more. He doesn't take from your opponent. I can imagine that being much meaner, like stealing a card from your opponent, steal from the rich, take from the poor. But this just rewards you from being a little behind. Either way, it looks like some interesting thing, but not much else beside that. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on this stuff and who you expect to see and what abilities you want to see from them. Now, let's get into game announcements. First up, we have from Reiner Knizia, San Francisco. I actually saw a quick demo of this when I was at Gen Con, but now it's going to be released into retail later this October. Then from Pladat, we have 2 new groups for Summoner Wars. We've got the Obsidian Dwarves and the Sand Goblins. So lots of earth-based creatures running amok there. Speaking of small packs, and this one's probably got a lot of people excited, Storm is joining Marvel Champions, continuing the recent, I believe they're in sort of a mutant X-Men line of heroes and characters right now. What's fun about Storm, though, it seems she has a new separate deck just for her, a weather deck. So she'll be changing the environment around everyone, being able to change things up, maybe give a tailwind to allies, maybe a hailstorm against your opponents. I'm really curious to see how you can mess around with the weather to change the effects on the battlefield. Then from Games Workshop, we are seeing the return of the squats, though I don't think they're called squats anymore, the League of Votarian Army set. These are the Space Dwarves. They used to be called squats, I believe, but now they have a whole new lore and system. I don't think they're technically the same in lore. Someone who has a better knowledge of that will have to correct me. But I'm sure a lot of people are excited to finally see them return to the tabletop. So quickly though, onto card games, because there's always going to be new announcements. Pokemon has a new box set, Virizion V. This should be coming out later in October. And then we have the new Paramount War booster set for the One Piece card game. I've seen pictures. I haven't tried it out yet. It really seems Bandai is going much harder on the trading card game. And so far, I think Dragon Ball did very well for them. Digimon's done well for them. I think One Piece has been doing pretty well in Japan. I mean, it's one of the biggest shows, so I'm not surprised. I think everything, including this set, is all 2023 release. We might see maybe some early 22 stuff like they did with Digimon. We'll have to wait and see what happens there, whether this can stick. But if any of this stuff interests you, let me know. I'm very excited if you are to hear from you and if I should be trying to hunt some of these games down, be it the card games, be it San Francisco, or be it your Space Dwarves. And now on to Kickstarter Pickstarter, and with a new edit of this because there was a new Kickstarter project I was not expecting to be released, and it just had to be included right now. So let's get to it. I talked about this in the news a while back, but CMON has announced finally their Dune for War of Arrakis Kickstarter project. You can see a lot more details about the game. It seems to be a head-to-head game in which one controls House Harkonnen, the other House Atreides. But it has lots of legendary little creatures, famous people from the story, some of them Kickstarter exclusive. But you will be playing against each other, fighting for territory and control. It seems that one starts off in the city, the other on the outskirts. But it has a lot of cool minis. Also, this seems to be interesting. You roll dice that go in different action pools where you can play certain cards into those pools to maybe get stronger actions from what I can see. In addition, it seems the board could evolve and change with certain paths opening or closing, but it seems to be really designed to be a tactical head-to-head combat game with lots of very pretty minis. There is a catch though. This is a heavy miniatures game and one from a company that's pretty confident that it'll go by, so that tends to leave only one pledge level, and that is at $110. This is actually a little surprising to me only because the box looks much smaller in my head, so maybe these are bigger than what I expect. But this is par for the course for a well-funded, well-known company in terms of making large miniatures games. And that is, of course, on top of the shipping. Make sure you check that. I think it's, for the most part, at least $50. Doesn't include any add-ons or anything if you're outside of China, pretty much. I think it was 15 for China and then like much higher for everywhere else outside of that. So make sure you know what you're getting into beforehand, because there is going to be a big price coming from the shipping, not just the game. But if you do like the Dune universe or head-to-head games, this is probably one you at least want to take a look at and see if this has some fun mechanics that you think is worthwhile on your shelf. Next, we have a legacy game, Sagrada Artisans, which is the, legacy version of Sagrada. In this, each player plays as a family going through different generations, and instead of usually placing dice onto a board, what you're going to have is actually a sort of coloring book. So you'll start off with squares, but you'll get some more advanced, interesting patterns later on with some more unique ways to combine colors and maybe probably change what rules are strong or weak because they're not the simple grid pattern. It's going to be very interesting there. And of course, I am a little curious about how the coloring will work out in particular, because when I think of Sagrada, I also think about moving dice around sometimes. Will that, once you color something in, will it be locked in? Because usually erasing colored pencils, at least in my experience, has not been the cleanest. So we'll have to see how that goes. Maybe I'm just being a bit too paranoid. Now, you can get the base game for $75, but they got plenty of other add-ons, including a reset kit if you wanted to start over. So double check that and see what you want. If you're a fan of Sagrada or just coloring, this may be a great game for you. Necromodes Call to Arms is the reprint and new expansion for the clay-based miniature fighting game. If you haven't seen the first one, this uses little molds for you to create your monsters in which you combat against each other. And when you defeat your opponent's creatures, you'll actually squash them because they're made of clay. So it has very much that 90s dexterity funness, I think, involved into it, but actually, a game attached. Now, the expansion adds a whole bunch of stuff. There are these legendary artifacts you can attach to guys, as well as maybe not straight up killing a guys, but you can put these red swords into the enemy, which means they've been weakened, they have a wound, as well as some powerful boards that you can take on called Necrocasters, giving you even some more powers along the way. Now, you can get the base game if you missed out for $60, but for the expansion, if you're watching this as soon as I released it, there is an early bird special that will be ending very soon for $40. So if this sounds interesting to you, right after you finish watching my video, definitely go run to that Kickstarter and check it out. Finally, we're heading over to GameFound for the return of Keyforge. This is the game in which each deck is unique, so once you buy it, you're the only one who has a copy of that deck, and you can challenge against each other with different factions. Each set either adding a faction, removing one, of course, with the factions having their own twists on different keywords and powers. So I don't know if there's not much else for me to add here. You can watch any previous video we talked about Keyforge, and obviously this is one of those things where they were like, let's see what happens, but as of this recording, they're doing well. So I don't think you have to worry if you are a fan of Keyforge whether this game has a future or not. Now, in terms of pledge levels, one of the things that was nice about Keyforge is you could buy like a deck for pretty cheap. This is not the case right now for this, but it's a bigger project. The lowest one, and if you're new, is about $50. That's sort of a starter kit thing. But then they have pretty much a bunch of big bundles that include lots of different decks. So wherever you are in Keyforge, you'll have to take a look and see which pledge level is right for you. Finally, let's talk about some projects that are ending, including two that I just talked about. First, let's talk about the ones that are ending within about 24 hours, give or take, of when I release this video. There's The Legacy of You, the single-player game that is a legacy story campaign. Then we've also got the Rivet Wars, the re-release of the Rivet Wars, where you are combating in this sort of diesel punk style with minis, and it has a campaign for both solo, cooperative, or competitive. But there's 2 other projects I talked about that should be ending just before next week's video. We've got Almost Innocent, the cooperative sort of puzzle solving game of trying to find out what went on, as well as the Kinfire Chronicles, the heavy story game that has a huge pedigree behind it. These all look like great games, so definitely run and check them out if any of these sound interesting to you. But that's it for now. Let me know about anything I talked about, whether it be your backing of these projects, any of the announcements, even if it was sort of light on board games. And in terms of news stories, did I talk way too much about cards, or would you like to hear me talk more about that stuff because you're interested too? Let me know in the comments down below. I love to hear from you about anything. But for now, that's it. Thank you so much for sticking by. And if you think any of these stories would be interesting to someone, please share with them. And of course, there's the usual YouTube stuff: the like, subscribe, the comment. It's what keeps videos going. But for now, I'm Will, and this has been a Roll for Crit.